Today, I'll take you through this iconic professional Pentax by popular demand. These cameras, from 4 decades ago, are marvels of electromechanical and optical design. The workflow forces you to be thoughtful and deliberate with every picture. The aim is to produce pictures which are reflections of a delicate moment in the life of this planet. So, reflections is the theme of the pictures taken on this camera, which I'll share throughout this video. The date is 1980 and it's the 60th anniversary of Asahi Optical Co., better known as Pentax.
お誕生日おめでとう。
We need to launch our new advanced professional camera to celebrate this special year. What should we call it? Any ideas? How about Pentax 60? Hi, but 60 doesn't sound special enough. And we've been using letters recently, like ME and MX. I have a better idea. We can use the Roman numerals, which are actually letters. Fine, what's 60 in Roman numerals? Here it is. We should call it Pentax LX. Wakarimashita. Anything with X sounds cool. Get the graphics department to create a logo that's mysterious and high-tech, like electronic circuits. Many years into the future, people should look at our LX logo and say, that's a timeless and powerful logo. And there it was. The much-loved professional Pentax LX SLR was launched in 1980 and produced for 22 years until 2001, a period only matched by Pentax K1000 and 1 year more than the longest-running Nikon F3, which was launched the same year. For long periods in the camera history, Pentax was a champion of popular cameras for serious enthusiasts, photography students, and beginners. It was the first Japanese company to produce an SLR camera in 1952, 7 years before Nikon F, the first to produce 1 million SLR cameras in 1966, and the first to produce 10 million SLRs in 1981. In the 60s and early 70s, Asahi, or its product Pentax, was an admired and respected camera maker, consistently getting positive reviews, but it never had a truly professional systems camera. When Pentax LX was finally launched, it had to compete with the likes of Nikon F3, Canon F1, Contax RTS, and Minolta X1. Pentax was 8 or 9 years late to the professional camera scene and had to overcompensate with features to make an impact. Pentax designers studied the feature list and the wish list of the professional cameras. They aimed to substantially exceed every one of the features considered desirable in 1980. Here's a short list. Pentax LX shutter had a wide range from 1/2000th of a second to a full 125 seconds or over 2 minutes, and it could perform aperture priority auto exposure through that entire range. Battery dependence? Professionals at the time were skeptical about reliance on those tiny button batteries. Nikon F3 tried to solve that problem with one fully mechanical shutter speed without using a battery, but using a separate fold-out button. Pentax LX improved on that with 6 backup mechanical shutter speeds that covered almost the entire daylight handheld shooting speeds from 1/75th of a second to 1/2000th of a second and without a separate button. Robust cameras. Professional cameras were supposed to be more robust than consumer cameras. Go anywhere, work anywhere. Pentax LX is a full metal alloy camera, but Pentax went further and introduced weather, moisture, and dust seals to the camera body. This also meant no flimsy foam light seals. Light metering. The Pentax LX light metering system was very innovative at the time, measuring the light off the film itself after shutter release. It would also do this during TTL flash use. Pentax LX was substantially smaller and lighter than the competing professional cameras at 570 grams for the body, with standard finder and battery. But as it is compact, it still feels dense and serious in the hand. Pentax LX works with almost every Pentax K-mount lens ever made, including the much later autofocus lenses, as long as they have an aperture ring. Even older screw-mount lenses can be attached with an adapter, but with light metering in the stop-down mode. Pentax LX came out of the box with a wide range of K-mount lenses and a shopping mall full of accessories, so it did everything right, except one thing: timing. By the time Pentax launched the LX, The professional photographers had already invested heavily in Nikon or Canon systems, lenses, and accessories. So Pentax LX did not beat Nikon or Canon in that market. Over 20 years of production, the LX was not rapidly iterated in the same way and did not introduce autofocus. But you shouldn't worry. After the passage of 40 years, that's academic and it doesn't matter. We can once again judge this bundle of innovation on its own merits. The film advance lever has a standoff position of 20 degrees and a full swing of 120 degrees. Winding is smooth all the way. After winding, a shutter cocked indicator changes from clear to red as a reminder. The frame counter is bidirectional. It's linked to the film frame rather than just the film winding action. It tracks each frame forward and backward during the rewind. This means you can go back to any frame on the roll and even do a multiple exposure if you want. It also means you can successfully swap film types in mid-roll by remembering the last frame you shot on each film. The shutter release button is here and is threaded for cable release. The shutter button has a half press function which turns on the light meter and the viewfinder LED indicators. These turn off automatically after 25 seconds. For me, this is much better than the 16 seconds in Nikon F3. I can never make up my mind about pressing the shutter button in 16 seconds. I have to think more and agonize over it. The shutter button has a lock, which also turns off the metering system. Turn this lever left to lock until you see the white dot in the front. Turn the lever right to unlock. This is the shutter dial, and here is the index. In this automatic exposure mode, the dial locks. In this mode, shutter speeds are stepless. You select the aperture and the camera electronically controls the shutter speeds from 1/2000th per second to 125 seconds. That's great for night photography. For manual control, press this dial lock and choose the shutter speed you want. Manual shutter speeds from 4 full seconds to 1/60th of a second are also electronically controlled, but manual shutter speeds from 1/75th of a second, marked with X, to 1/2000th per second and B for bulb are mechanical and work even without batteries. X, by the way, indicates the flash sync speed of 1/75th of the second. The ISO dial is here under the rewind crank, but labeled as ASA, which is the same thing. The camera came out before the age of DX coding, so you need to set the ISO yourself. Press the release lock here and turn until the correct ISO comes up in the window and firmly clicks in position. The range is ISO 6 to ISO 3200, which is more than you ever need. Between each two numbers, there are two dots that indicate the in-between ISO numbers. For example, between 100 and 200, there are two dots for ISO 125 and ISO 160. In the auto exposure mode, you can override the camera's meter with this exposure compensation dial. Normally it rests at 1x. Press the safety lock and rotate the dial. Compensation is available from -2 to +2 stops in 1/3 increments. +1 stop over exposure means twice the light, so the label says 2x. 2 stops means 4 times the light, so the label says 4x. The same applies to underexposure. -1 stop means half the light, and -2 stops means a quarter of the light. I'm emphasizing this because in other cameras, such as Nikon F3, they're usually labeled by stops, such as +1, +2, or -1, -2, etc., not by amount of light, 2x and 4x and so on. If you put the exposure compensation dial on anything other than 1x, a red patch appears on the right side of the viewfinder to remind you to return the dial back to 1x after the current shot. This is a triple function self-timer lever. Press the center button and move the lever away from the lens, and it acts as a self-timer like this. The length of time is from 4 to 10 seconds depending on how much you turn the lever. Before pressing the shutter button, you can change your mind. You can cancel the self-timer by returning it to the original position. Just press towards the lens without pressing the center button, and it acts as a depth of field preview like this. It narrows the aperture to what you've selected to indicate the actual depth of field the film is going to capture. Press the center button and move the lever towards the lens, and it locks up the mirror like this. This is useful for getting rid of the smallest mirror vibration. The mirror is released if you press the button again. This is a wonderful execution that keeps it simple and uncluttered. To detach the lens, press this button and rotate left. Do the reverse to attach the lens. For film loading, it is best to take the camera off the auto mode and select the manual shutter speed. Otherwise, during the film loading, when you need to do a few blank shots, especially with a cap on, the camera may give a very long exposure time, delaying your film load. Here's the recommended film loading method. Lift up the rewind knob all the way to open the back. Put the film in the left chamber. Stretch the film leader to the other side and press between any of these white needles. Wind and shoot blanks until the film goes around and properly engages with the sprocket wheel. Make sure the film is flat and close the back. Do a few blank shots until the frame counter reaches number 1. This is your first real shot. If you want to learn the trick for achieving 1, 2 or 3 additional shots on the same film roll, see the end of this video, where I explain the technique using Nikon FE. The same can be used in this camera. After you reach the end of the film roll, press the rewind button at the bottom of the camera. Open the rewind crank and turn it until you feel the end of the film released. You can take the film out immediately and leave a little leader out, as a shortcut in case you want to develop the film yourself. Otherwise, turn the crank a few more times and the film goes completely inside the cartridge. The film rewind knob also functions as a multiple exposure button. After you take the first shot, press the rewind button and wind again. The film will stay on the same frame, but the shutter gets tensioned. Now take the second shot. You can repeat this process if you want even more shots on the same frame. The next time you wind without pressing the rewind button, the film will also advance as normal. This process is strictly for the hardcore purists. The rest of us will combine the pictures in Photoshop. The light metering is center weighted and uses a technique called integrated direct metering, or IDM. When you half press the shutter button, light gathered by the lens comes through a semi-transparent section of the mirror. It hits the secondary mirror and bounces down to a silicon photodiode. The result is shown in the viewfinder. You can use it for manual exposure and shoot. In the auto mode, after you fully press the shutter button, the mirror flips up and light now hits the titanium first shutter curtain, which has a reflective dot pattern. The photodiode measures the light off that surface and soon after the film itself, depending on fast or slow shutter speed. This is now the definitive light measurement. When the photodiode measures enough photons of light, the shutter closes. So the final calculations are done in real time, not fixed ahead of time. It also allows for accurate light measurement for exceptionally long exposure times. This standard eye-level pentaprism viewfinder is FA1. It shows 98% of vertical and 95% of horizontal picture area. It is nice and clear with a full information display. This shows the standard SC21 focusing screen with split image spot surrounded by macro prism collar. I find this type of focusing screen the easiest to use for manual focus. The results of light measurement are shown as a column of LED dots on the right in 3 colors. These light up like a virtual needle. The aperture f-stop is shown at the top of the view. In the aperture priority auto mode, it is extremely simple. This transparent blue needle will be on the A. When you half press the shutter button, the LED that lights up shows the approximate shutter speed that the camera is going to use. Higher LED means more light, lower LED means less light. At the top of the column, the red LED means overexposure. At the bottom of the column, the red LED means long time exposure, such as up to 125 seconds. When you press the shutter button, the actual shutter speed will be stepless and somewhere between the numbers shown. It may even change during the exposure if the lighting condition suddenly changes, for example, during very fast action or very long exposure times. The only question is whether the speed selected is suitable for handheld shots or not. The camera guides you. If the LED is in green range, the answer is yes. If it is in the yellow range, the answer is no. Use a tripod or increase the aperture size a few stops so that the shutter speed reaches the green range. The middle red LED means X, or 1/75th of a second for flash synchronization and flash ready. In the manual mode, you set the aperture and shutter speeds yourself. A transparent blue needle moves down to show your actual choice of shutter speed. You need to match it with the LED that indicates the camera's recommended shutter speed based on the aperture that you've selected. So it's a virtual match the needle system, the easiest manual system ever invented. It's almost identical to Contax RTS and Nikon FE, both representing the best of their kind. The same indications of over and under exposure apply to manual mode as in the auto mode. But in the manual mode, if the bottom LED lights up, it means the shutter is set to the B or bulb and you're on your own. Just like Nikon F3, light measuring is independent of the viewfinder, so Pentax LX can use any of the many viewfinders available or none at all. The viewfinder is replaceable and there are 8 alternatives. Push this lever to the right and slide the finder back, just like Canon F1. The FA1 and FA2 finders have built-in diopter adjustment, so there is no need to buy separate diopter lenses. Release and pull back the viewfinder just a little without removing. At the bottom, a screw is exposed. Use a screwdriver or similar and turn it while you look through the viewfinder. When the borders of the split image spot are in sharp focus, you have the right diopter. Push the viewfinder into position and it's fixed. This was a new feature for this type of camera. This FA1 standard finder has a hot shoe on top. For Pentax flash units, it offers TTL or through-the-lens integrated flash control with Pentax T-type flash units such as AF280T or AF400T. With flash and camera on auto mode, they automatically synchronize. The LED next to the X shutter speed lights up to indicate flash ready. The camera will measure a combination of flash and ambient light directly off the film plane and adjust to that combination. There are 2 more PC flash sockets on the front to connect off-camera flash units. One for electronic X-flash and one for FP or focal plane flash bulbs. Suffice to say, in this century, you'll be using the X-flash. Bottom of the camera is crowded. These connect to the winder or motor drive for the film transport and rewind. These are the electronic connections to the winder and motor drive. This is the tripod socket. This is a battery chamber cap. For batteries, Pentax recommends 2 silver oxide or 2 alkaline button batteries with a positive side up. Today your choices are SR44 or LR44. LR44 is cheaper and more likely to find in a shop. SR44 will last longer and has a slightly better power curve. To check the battery, look inside the viewfinder and half press the shutter button. If one or more LEDs light up, the battery is okay. If they come up but flicker, it means they're very weak and should be replaced. If the batteries fail while the camera is in auto mode or on one of the electronic shutter speeds, the mirror will lock up and you might think the camera is faulty. It is not. Just rotate the shutter dial to select one of the mechanical shutter speeds and the mirror will come down. Of course, you should also change the battery as soon as possible. There are focusing screens designed for the LX. The earlier Pentax MX focusing screens can also be used, as they are dimensionally compatible, but they're not as bright. The focusing screen is changed through the lens mount with special tweezers that come with replacement screens. A dedicated Winder LX and a Motor Drive LX are available. They offer automatic advance and rewind. The Winder LX uses 4 AA batteries and achieves a whopping 2 frames per second shooting speed in continuous mode. The Motor Drive LX can use NiCad battery pack or 12 AA batteries or an AC converter and achieve 5 frames per second in continuous mode. The data back called Dial Data LX superimposes up to 3 characters chosen by the user in the corner of the frame. The Watch Data LX superimposes a tiny analog clock face in the corner of the frame. It shows the day of the month, hour, minute, and second. In order to block that corner of the film for the clock face, the camera has a curious feature in the bottom right corner of the shutter housing. This thing is called the film blind, activated by rotating this knob counterclockwise. This is on the bottom right of the negative, which means the top left side of the picture when you view it the right way around. On the front of the camera, you will notice fasteners. 3 of these can be used for attaching proprietary neck straps, like this one. The strap can be attached to any 2 of the fasteners to carry the camera in the horizontal or vertical direction. There are two accessory grips A and B. The contoured grip B is the one you should want. These can be attached and tightened with a screw. I personally don't bother with the grips. I would rather have the leather half case, which is sufficiently grippy, like this. The Pentax LX body had 3 very minor variations over the long production run, all without any change in the name. The visible variation was a design of the lock switch. Another late variation was a double use of the button on top of the viewfinder release lever as an alternative to the shutter half press to activate the light meter. Pentax LX Gold was released in 1981 to celebrate 10 million SLRs produced. I'm not impressed. To my eyes, the Gold LX is ugly and seems like something designed for crazy rich people or rich crazy people living on private yachts, I guess. Pentax LX Titanium was released in 1994 to mark the company's 75th anniversary. Now, this one looks fantastic and I want one. Pentax LX 2000 in a lighter metal finish was released in the year 2000, and that was the last one. In conclusion, the appeal of Pentax LX today is that it does everything that a competent professional film camera is expected to do, short of autofocus. I'm sure you can turn a focusing ring with your fingers and even enjoy it. There's no shortage of features and all of them have been executed exceptionally well. Pentax LX is the most compact and lightest of the professional film cameras of its time. It has a ton of high-quality K-mount lenses available at bargain prices. As a bonus, the company is still around and surprisingly making new film cameras. They should be rewarded for that with a resurgence of interest in Pentax. If you have outgrown your Pentax K1000 learner's camera or you are rediscovering the rich and artistic world of film photography, Pentax LX should be on your top 10 shopping list. Although it's a professional grade camera, today it's no more expensive than some amateur level cameras from other brands, so why not? You will be getting an exceptional film camera with historic significance at an affordable but steadily increasing price. Resist the usual groupthink and seriously consider this Pentax LX. That's it. Subscribe means thank you.